It was the third week of October when Mr. Ellison first truly saw the boy, not just the name on the attendance sheet, but the boy behind it. His name was Caleb Moore, row 3, seat 5, always quiet, always early, always invisible. There were no disciplinary marks beside his name, no parent contacts, no late homework, but something about the way he moved, silent, deliberate, as if apologizing for breathing, pulled at Mr. Ellison's gut in a way he couldn't quite explain. The school was loud that morning, kids yelling across the halls, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking on tile, but Caleb walked through it like fog, like he wasn't really there. Ellison watched him settle into his desk, open his tattered notebook, and stare at the blank page. He never looked up, not even when Ellison called for attendance. Just a small hand raised halfway into the air, not to be seen, just to avoid attention. That day, during lunch duty, Ellison noticed something strange. Caleb wasn't in the cafeteria. He checked the hallway, the library, the stairwell. Then he found him, sitting behind the gym, knees pulled to his chest, unwrapping a half-eaten granola bar like it was fine cuisine. No lunchbox, no drink, just that. Ellison didn't interrupt. He just stood there for a moment, letting the image brand itself into his memory. That night, Ellison stayed late at his desk. He opened the school system, pulled up Caleb's file. Sparse, no disciplinary notes, no emergency contacts listed besides a disconnected number, no parent emails. Just one note from a school nurse dated nearly a year ago. Student appears underweight, suggested follow-up. Ellison stared at that sentence for a long time. The next morning, he left an apple on Caleb's desk. No note, no explanation. The boy didn't touch it. The day after, it was a cheese sandwich, still untouched. But on the third day, he left a warm blueberry muffin, wrapped in a napkin, slightly crushed, but smelling like cinnamon and home. That one disappeared before second period. Caleb never said a word, but he looked up once and met Mr. Ellison's eyes, just for a second. It wasn't gratitude, not yet. It was suspicion softened by hunger, and Ellison knew he'd cracked something open. The next Monday, it rained. Not the soft, forgiving kind, but a cold, slanting storm that made the town feel smaller, sadder. Mr. Ellison arrived early and saw Caleb standing outside the school building soaked through. His hoodie clung to his frame, heavy with water. No umbrella, no backpack, just a plastic grocery bag clutched in both hands. Ellison unlocked the side door and waved him in. "Come on, you'll get sick out there." Caleb hesitated. Water dripped from his sleeves. His sneakers made little puddles on the linoleum. He didn't say a word. Ellison led him to the teacher's lounge. He didn't touch him, didn't guide him, just walked slowly so the boy could follow without feeling chased. Once inside, he grabbed a clean towel from the old cabinet in the corner and offered it silently. Caleb took it. He dried his arms and neck without looking up. "You eat yet?" Ellison asked. A shrug, then, after a moment, "Not yet, sir." Ellison opened the mini fridge and pulled out a wrapped breakfast sandwich, warmed it in the microwave. No words, just motion. He placed it gently in front of the boy. Caleb looked at it like it might be a trick. "You can have it, I've got another," Ellison said, holding up a second sandwich still in its wrapper. "I eat too much anyway." A flicker of a smile crossed Caleb's lips. Tiny, almost accidental, and he took a bite, chewed slowly. That morning, Ellison taught his first period history class with a strange new energy. Something soft had opened inside him, like a door he didn't know had been closed. At lunch, he checked again. Caleb wasn't behind the gym. This time, he sat alone at a corner table in the cafeteria, a paper bag beside him. Inside, Ellison knew, was the sandwich, and maybe a few apple slices. That night, he drove past the west end of town, past the gas station that never fixed its flickering light, past the boarded-up laundromat, past the hollowed-out house with blue tarp instead of windows. That's where he saw him, Caleb. carrying a jug of water and a bag of groceries that didn't look heavy enough for a full meal. He walked up the steps of an old duplex and vanished inside. No porch light, no mailbox, just shadows. Ellison parked a few houses down. He sat there, engine off, listening to the rain on the roof of his car. He thought about reporting it, but what would that fix? Would they send someone? Would they care? Sometimes the system wasn't broken, it just wasn't looking. He went home and opened his laptop, searched for food assistance programs, found a local pantry and made a note of its open hours. He didn't know if Caleb's mother or anyone would go, but he had to try something. The next morning, there was a card in Caleb's desk, no name, just an address, and the words, "Free food, no questions asked." Caleb found it after first bell, and he didn't say anything, but when he looked up at Ellison, there was something different in his eyes. Not trust yet, but curiosity. The following week, Caleb came to school with a bruise on his wrist, faint, yellowing, but unmistakable. Mr. Ellison noticed it during second period when the boy reached for a pencil. He didn't ask, not right away. Instead, he waited until after class. "Hey, Caleb," he said casually. "Mind helping me carry some books down to the library?" Caleb blinked. "Sure, sir." They walked the long hallway in silence, Caleb carrying half the load. The weight seemed light to Ellison, but the boy's breathing grew shallow by the time they reached the bottom of the stairs. "You okay?" Ellison asked. "Fine." The answer came too fast. They stepped into the quiet of the library, the shelves muffled sound, only a few kids sat at the tables, heads bent over open books. "Let's set these down here." Ellison nodded to a side table. When they did, he turned. "You want to tell me about your wrist?" Caleb's body stiffened. "I fell," he mumbled. Ellison crouched slightly, lowering his voice. "Okay, if that's what happened, I'll believe you, but if there's more—" "I'm here." Caleb nodded, but his eyes drifted sideways, never quite meeting Ellison's. "I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble," Ellison said carefully. "I just want to make sure you're safe. You and your mom." At the mention of his mother, Caleb flinched. "She's sick," he whispered. "But she's not mean, not usually, just tired." Ellison stood still, letting the words settle. "I get tired too," he said softly, "but I still try not to hurt people." That hit something. Caleb's lips pressed together and his fingers curled at his sides. "Sometimes," he said, "you get scared and you act like someone else." Ellison nodded. He knew that feeling too well. Back when he was 10, his father had broken a coffee mug in a rage, then a chair, then his mother's silence. Sometimes what broke wasn't a thing. It was a person. Caleb turned away. "I gotta go. She'll worry. She knows you're here?" A pause. "No, she thinks I'm at the store." That answer said more than he meant it to. "Wait a second," Ellison said gently. He stepped into the librarian's office and came back with a granola bar and a small orange. "Eat this before you leave." Caleb took it, not with gratitude, but with the kind of quiet urgency that said he didn't know when the next one would come. "Thanks," he said, and then he ran. Ellison stood by the window and watched him disappear into the fog outside. That night, the weight of being a teacher felt different. Less like a job, more like a promise. He sat at his kitchen table and pulled out an old composition notebook. The cover was cracked, corners curled. On the first page he wrote, "Caleb Dunn, age 11. Wears the same blue hoodie every day. Scared of loud noises. Always hungry. Doesn't lie, but doesn't tell the truth easily either." He tapped his pen, then added, "He needs someone, not a savior, just someone to stay." It was a Thursday afternoon when Caleb didn't show up to school. No call, no note, nothing. Ellison tried not to panic. Kids got sick. Families took off unexpectedly. But deep down, something in his gut twisted. It wasn't like Caleb to just disappear. By lunch, he was pacing in the staff parking lot, chewing the inside of his cheek. After his last class, he got in his car and drove. He didn't have an address, but he remembered the street, the cracked sidewalk, the house with the blue tarp, the mailbox long rusted shut. He parked a few houses down, sat there, engine running, then got out. He knocked twice, no answer. Just when he was about to turn back, he heard it. A faint sound, a cough. He pushed the door gently. It creaked open. Inside, the house smelled of mildew and old laundry. Light filtered in weakly through dirty curtains. He called out, "Caleb?" A beat of silence. Then a voice, raspy, small. "In here." He followed it to a bedroom. Caleb sat on the floor, his back against the wall, his hoodie balled up like a pillow beneath him. Beside him, on the bed, lay a woman, frail, shivering under a thin blanket. "My mom's sick," Caleb whispered. Ellison stepped closer. The woman's eyes fluttered open, then closed again. "No insurance," Caleb added. "We can't go anywhere." Ellison crouched beside him. "How long has she been like this?" "Since yesterday, maybe the day before." "Why didn't you tell someone?" Caleb looked at him then, and in his eyes was something far heavier than a child should carry. "Because last time I did, they tried to take me away." The room went still. Ellison didn't ask who they were. Didn't need to. He stood, gently pulled out his phone, called a friend, a retired nurse who sometimes volunteered at a nearby shelter. "Just come," he said. "No questions." She arrived 30 minutes later with a bag of supplies and the kind of calm Ellison didn't have. While she checked the woman's vitals, Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor, his arms wrapped tightly around himself. "She gets bad sometimes," he said quietly, "but she always comes back." Ellison sat beside him, not too close. "Does anyone else know? Any family?" Caleb shook his head. "Just me." The nurse spoke softly. "She needs fluids, sleep, a warm room, nothing serious yet, but close." Ellison nodded. "She'll stay with me tonight," the nurse offered. "You too, if you want." Caleb looked at Ellison. Ellison waited. The boy gave a small nod. That night, Caleb slept on the couch in the nurse's spare room. He didn't say a word as he curled up, shoes still on, arms tucked to his chest. Before turning out the light, Ellison asked, "Do you want me to stay?" Another nod. He pulled up a chair and sat beside the couch, listening to the soft hum of the old heater, watching over a boy who had learned to survive in silence. And in that silence, something deep shifted in him, because sometimes the most important thing wasn't what you said, it was that you stayed. Caleb didn't return to school for 3 more days, but on the 4th morning he showed up, hair combed, eyes heavy, but awake. Hoodie zipped all the way up. He didn't look better, but he looked like he was trying. Ellison met him at the school gate, said nothing, just nodded. Sometimes that was enough. That afternoon, after class, Caleb lingered by the door. Ellison looked up from his desk. "Can I stay here a while?" Caleb asked, almost too soft to hear. "You can stay as long as you want." Caleb sat in the back row, took out a library book, didn't read it, just kept flipping the pages, staring at the same line over and over. Ellison continued grading papers but kept an eye on him. When the janitor finally rattled his mop bucket down the hallway, Caleb looked up. "Do you think people like my mom are bad?" he asked suddenly. Ellison set his pen down. "No," he said. "I think sometimes the world breaks people, and sometimes they don't have anything soft to land on." Caleb nodded slowly, but the question had opened something raw in him. "She wasn't always like that," he whispered. "When I was little, she used to sing to me, make silly pancakes. She made me a cardboard robot suit once. I think I was 5. He looked at the floor. "Now she barely talks, just coughs, and screams sometimes, like she's in a war only she can see." Ellison's heart twisted. "I believe she loved you," he said gently. "Still does, even if it's hard to see." Caleb clenched his jaw. "That's not enough though, is it?" "No," Ellison admitted, "but it's something." They sat in silence for a long time. Then Caleb asked, "Were your parents nice?" Ellison hesitated. "My mom tried. My dad drank more than he spoke. When I was your age, I used to sleep with my shoes on, just in case I had to run." Caleb looked up, eyes wide. You? Ellison smiled faintly. Yeah, me. That moment shifted something between them. A tiny bridge of shared understanding built quietly over old wounds. The next week, Ellison started staying later after school, not for extra lessons, not for planning, just to be there. Sometimes Caleb helped him sort papers. Sometimes they cleaned the whiteboard together in complete silence. Once, Ellison brought in a chess set. You ever played? He asked. Nope. Want to learn? Caleb shrugged, but he sat and learned. He lost the first 5 games, badly. On the 6th, he lasted almost till the end. You're getting sneaky, Ellison said. I've had practice, Caleb muttered, then added, surviving teaches you strategy. The words landed heavy. Ellison didn't reply. He just reset the board. That weekend, Caleb's mom was hospitalized again. Dehydration, pneumonia, another infection. She'd wandered into the street barefoot, disoriented. A neighbor called it in. Ellison got the call from the nurse. He picked Caleb up from the shelter. Caleb didn't cry. He just stared out the window. She doesn't remember me sometimes, he said. Last week she called me Jake. I don't even know who Jake is. They drove in silence for a while. Then Ellison asked, Do you want to stay at the shelter again tonight? Caleb shook his head. Can I stay with you? Ellison hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because he knew what that meant. I'll have to make a few calls, he said quietly. And that night, for the first time in over a decade, Ellison sat at his kitchen table and filled out the paperwork to become a temporary guardian. The form asked questions Ellison hadn't thought about in years. Are you currently married? No. Have you ever been convicted of a felony? No. Do you understand the responsibilities of temporary guardianship? Yes, God, yes. It took 3 hours to complete the forms, mostly in silence, with Caleb sitting cross-legged on the rug, picking at the frayed hem of his hoodie. I can go back to the shelter if it's too much, Caleb offered. Ellison looked up from the last page. It's not too much. You don't have to lie, the boy said quietly. Everyone always does. Ellison sighed. Then maybe you should hear it from someone who won't. It's going to be hard. I don't know if I'll always do it right, but I'm not going anywhere. Caleb didn't answer. But he didn't move either. That night, he slept on the pull-out sofa, still wearing his hoodie, curled up with a blanket Ellison had found in the back of the closet. He left the hallway light on. Didn't ask for it, but Ellison noticed he kept glancing toward it before drifting off. The next few weeks passed slowly. Caleb started to open up, tiny gestures, small signs. He washed his dishes after dinner. He walked the neighbor's dog for spare change. He asked Ellison to buy peanut butter, the crunchy kind, not the boring, smooth one, and he came to class every single day. At school, no one asked where he was staying. Most didn't notice, but Ellison did. He noticed that Caleb stopped flinching when someone called his name, that he started answering questions in class, not many, but enough that his handwriting slowly got neater, as if he finally believed someone might actually read it. One night, after a dinner of reheated spaghetti and grocery store garlic bread, Caleb sat on the back porch steps, quiet, staring out at the dusky sky. Ellison joined him. No words, just sat. I saw my mom last weekend, Caleb finally said. She didn't recognize me at first. Ellison waited. She thought I was a nurse, told me to get out of her room. Then she asked for a glass of orange juice. I just stood there. His voice cracked. I hate that I didn't cry. I felt like I should, but I just walked out. Ellison didn't say, it's okay, didn't say, she'll get better, didn't lie. Instead, he said, sometimes you go numb because your body knows you can't handle one more heartbreak. Caleb stared at his shoes. Do you think she ever really wanted me? Ellison closed his eyes. I think wanting someone and knowing how to care for them are two very different things, and I think sometimes people fail at both. But that doesn't mean you weren't worth loving. The boy didn't answer, but he leaned in just slightly, enough to be felt, not enough to break. A few days later, a social worker came by, Routine check. She asked about meals, schoolwork, sleeping habits. When she left, Caleb sat rigid on the couch. She's gonna take me, isn't she? No, Ellison said gently. Not if we keep doing this right. She looked at me like I was broken. You're not. Caleb didn't believe him. Not yet. But Ellison kept saying it anyway. Every morning, every night, in small ways, in quiet gestures. He said it in the way he left an extra granola bar in Caleb's backpack, in the way he didn't press when Caleb came home silent and withdrawn, in the way he let the boy sleep in late on weekends without guilt or questions. Love, he was learning, was not a grand gesture. It was repetition. A soft hand at the shoulder, a plate warmed in the oven, a ride home when the sky grew too dark. One night, Caleb left a piece of paper on the kitchen counter, a drawing, stick figures, one tall, one small, a crooked house, a dog. In the corner, a single line of text written in shaky block letters. You make it less hard. Ellison stared at it for a long time, then folded it gently and slipped it into the back of his wallet. It happened on a Wednesday. Cold, wet, dark. Ellison was grading papers when the call came. Not from school, not from social services. From the hospital. This is Dr. Yang at County General. We have a minor, Caleb Moore, brought in with signs of hypothermia and fatigue. His name was listed with your contact information. His breath left his body in a sharp, fractured rush. What happened? Collapsed at a bus stop. No ID, but his name was stitched into the inside of his hoodie. He's stable now, but he's asking for you. Ellison drove too fast, parked sideways, forgot his coat. When he entered the room, Caleb looked small beneath white sheets, pale, lips slightly blue, but his eyes were open. I didn't mean to scare you, the boy said. Ellison pulled the chair closer. Where were you? I went to see her again, Caleb murmured. My mom, I don't know what I thought. She wasn't even there. They said she was transferred. I walked around for hours. Then I sat, and I guess I fell asleep. Ellison didn't speak right away, because what could he say? He reached out, gently touched Caleb's wrist. His skin was cold, still trembling. You don't get to disappear like that, Ellison said softly. Not from me. I didn't want you to see me like that. Like what? Lost. Ellison's voice broke. You're allowed to be lost, Caleb. You're allowed to fall apart. I didn't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. You're a kid. You're my kid now. Silence. Then Caleb looked away. You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true. He stayed the night in the hospital chair, cramped, uncomfortable, but he didn't care. When Caleb drifted off to sleep, Ellison watched the rise and fall of his chest and thought of how close he'd come to losing him, not just to cold or hunger or exhaustion, but to the deep, invisible ache that lived behind Caleb's ribs, the kind that told you the world didn't care if you vanished. Ellison made a silent promise. Never again. The next day, Caleb came home. No school, just rest. Ellison took time off, cooked soup, sat beside him with old movies on mute. Neither of them talked much, but the quiet wasn't empty. It was healing. That weekend, Ellison bought a second blanket. Not because Caleb asked, but because he'd noticed the boy curling tighter in the mornings, as if trying to keep warmth from escaping. He also added Caleb to his grocery list officially, wrote his name beside apples and peanut butter and milk. It felt small, but also monumental. Then something else happened, unexpected. Caleb smiled. Not forced, not hollow, not a protective smirk. A real, crooked, radiant smile at a joke Ellison made about the burnt toast. It hit Ellison harder than he'd anticipated, because it was the first time he saw the boy not just surviving, but living. A few days later, Caleb brought home a note from school. Not disciplinary. A poem, written by him. It read, The sky is wide, but I was smaller. I curled beneath it like a leaf in fall. Then one day, someone picked me up, held me like I wasn't meant to be stepped on. At the bottom, in small letters, To the man who didn't step? Ellison read it 3 times. Then he pressed the paper flat, slid it into a picture frame, and placed it on his nightstand. It started with a question, quiet, almost careless. "Did you ever think about having kids?" Caleb asked. They were doing dishes. Caleb dried while Ellison rinsed. Ellison hesitated, once or twice. "But I never thought I'd be any good at it." Caleb smirked. "You're better than most." The words caught him off guard, not because they weren't true, but because of how easily Caleb said them, like they'd been sitting there inside his chest, waiting for a safe place to land. Ellison turned the faucet off. Let the silence stretch. Then he said, "You know, I used to write letters to my future son before I even knew if I'd ever have one." Caleb looked over. "What kind of letters?" "Things I wish someone had told me when I was growing up. Stuff I didn't want to forget." "Do you still have them?" Ellison nodded. "Somewhere in the back of my closet. I haven't touched them in years. Can I read one?" Ellison didn't answer. Instead, he dried his hands, disappeared into his bedroom, and came back with a small, wrinkled notebook. He handed it over. "You can read this one out loud if you want." Caleb sat down on the couch, legs tucked beneath him, opened the first page. The ink was faded, the handwriting careful. "Dear son, if the world ever makes you feel too heavy, don't carry it alone. There will be someone, someday, someone who stays when you're silent, someone who sees the worst of you and doesn't flinch. That someone is not perfect, but they'll fight for your light even when you've forgotten it exists." Caleb's voice trembled by the last line. He didn't finish the page, just closed the notebook gently, like something sacred, then whispered, "Do you think I could be someone's someone someday?" Ellison's eyes met his, no hesitation. "You already are." Later that night, after Caleb had fallen asleep with the notebook beside his pillow, Ellison sat on the edge of his bed and started writing again, for the first time in a decade. But this one wasn't to a future son, it was to the boy asleep in the next room. "Dear Caleb, you made me a father the moment you let me in. You made me whole the day you called this house home, and even if you never say it out loud, I see it in how you've stopped flinching when I reach for the light. You're not broken. You were just waiting for someone to stay." He didn't sign it, didn't have to. The next day, Caleb found the note on the kitchen table. He didn't say anything, but later he washed the dishes without being asked, then packed 2 lunches instead of 1. Then, after dinner, he called Ellison Dad, just once, softly. But it echoed, and it stayed. It was a Sunday afternoon when the knock came, soft, hesitant. Caleb was in his room, headphones on. Ellison opened the door with a dish towel still slung over his shoulder. A woman stood there, thin, faded, her eyes too big for her face, bones sharp beneath pale skin. It took Ellison a moment. Then it hit him. "Miss Moore?" She nodded slowly. "Is he here?" The hospital had lost track of her. Caleb had stopped asking. But there she was, his mother in the flesh. Ellison's voice was firm. "Why now?" "I got help," she said. "Rehab, clean, 6 months." He didn't say anything, not right away. She continued, I know I left him, but I want to see him, just once. Please." He thought of saying no, thought of protecting the small peace Caleb had fought so hard to find. But something in her voice, not desperation, but regret, made him pause. "I'll ask," Ellison said, "but it's his decision." When Caleb came downstairs, he stopped in the hallway. She turned, eyes locked. Neither moved. Then she whispered, "You've grown." Caleb didn't smile, didn't cry, just stared. "You left," he said quietly. "I know. You said you'd come back. I waited. I waited so long it started to rot me from the inside." "I'm sorry." Caleb shook his head. "You don't get to say that and expect it to fix anything." "I don't expect anything. I just wanted to see your face again, to know you were okay." "I wasn't, for a long time." Silence. Then, "But I'm trying to be." He didn't invite her in, didn't hug her, but before she turned to leave, he said, "I hope you keep trying too." That night, Ellison found Caleb sitting on the back porch, arms around his knees, staring at the sky. "Want to talk about it?" he asked. "No," Caleb said, "not really." Then after a pause, "But thanks for letting me decide. You always get to decide what to do with your pain." Caleb leaned his head on Ellison's shoulder. "I don't know if I'll ever stop hurting when I think of her." "You don't have to," Ellison said. "You just have to let the hurt change shape, so it doesn't own you." They stayed outside until the stars came out. Caleb finally whispered, "When I saw her, I thought I'd feel something huge, but I didn't." "That's okay. I think I already gave the last piece of me away to someone who actually stayed." Ellison swallowed the lump in his throat. "I hope he knows what that means," he said. Caleb looked at him, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "He does." Spring came slowly. The kind of spring you don't notice at first, just the way a tree outside the window starts to leaf, or how the sun lingers 5 minutes longer than yesterday. In many ways, life didn't change. Caleb still made 2 cups of coffee every morning, one for Ellison, one for himself. Ellison still left encouraging notes in his textbooks when he wasn't looking. They still argued about what movie to watch on Friday nights, still forgot whose turn it was to take out the trash. But in other ways, everything was different. One evening, Caleb came home with ink on his hands and a folded piece of paper in his jacket pocket. He sat across from Ellison at the kitchen table and slid the paper toward him. "What's this?" "My college essay," Caleb said. "I figured if anyone should read it first, it should be you." Ellison opened it, read slowly. It wasn't about grades or achievements or obstacles. It was about light, about the light he almost forgot he had, about the man who saw it anyway. "He never raised his voice," Caleb had written, "but he never let me forget who I could become. Some days he taught me math, but mostly he taught me how to be someone worth staying for." Ellison looked up. Caleb wasn't crying, but his eyes were damp and his hands were shaking just a little. "Did I go too far?" he asked. "No," Ellison said softly. "You told the truth." The acceptance letter came a month later. "Scholarship, full ride," Caleb screamed. Ellison lifted him off the ground like he weighed nothing. They laughed until they couldn't breathe. That night, when Caleb sat on the porch alone, staring out at the world he was finally ready for, Ellison joined him. "You're going to do big things," he said. Caleb nodded. "I know." Then, after a long pause, "But I'm scared," Ellison smiled. "Good, means it matters. Promise you'll be okay without me?" Ellison didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You were never mine to keep, just mine to protect long enough for you to become your own." On the day Caleb left for college, the house felt too quiet, too clean. Ellison wandered from room to room, unsure what to do with all the silence. But then he saw it, on the kitchen table, a small wrinkled notebook, the one Ellison had once given Caleb. Inside, a letter written in fresh ink. "Dear Dad, thank you for staying, for seeing me, for teaching me that broken things still shine. I'm not whole yet, but I'm on my way, and you're the reason I even started." Ellison closed the notebook, and for the first time in a long, long while, he let himself cry, not from grief, not from loss, but from love, the kind that stays.